Hey, Peg.
Hey, Julie, are you feeling any better?
I laid down for about an hour, but no.
Oh, I'm
But,
sorry.
it went really quick for my 2-year-old, so I'm praying for
Yeah,
expeditiousness.
I hear ya.
So you're down in Santa Barbara with your mom?
I am, yeah.
Oh, good.
Yep,
I'm just admitting people from the waiting room here.
sure.
Hi, folks. How's everyone doing? Hey, George.
Good. How are you?
Hey, Johan. I'm doing all right. I caught my 2-year-old's cold, which is not fun, but it only
Kind
took
of
him
cut
a
out.
day to get over it. Then again, he gets his energy by sucking it directly from my soul. It's one of my favorite parent memes. So might take me a few more
And
days.
at that age, they're just like a little petri dish too.
And he just started a new school, and Dylan
Oh,
just started
perfect.
first
Yeah.
grade. So that's my other favorite parent meme of, oh, I'm so looking forward to seeing what all the new germs are that my kid brings home this fall.
We had a guy that used to work with us, and his wife was a kindergarten teacher, and he had small children at home. And so we considered him the hub of all diseases at the agency.
Different kind of hub, Peggy. Let's not mince words when we use that word. Okay. Just letting people in from the waiting room. You'll notice that Commissioner Nancy Wise is joining us tonight. Zan is on vacation, a much deserved earned vacation. I think her first in a long time. So Nancy will be here in her stead for commissioner representation. Okay, just a few more folks, board members I'm admitting, and then we'll get your meeting started. Jan, thank you. No minutes changes needed in your humble opinion, but there's a reference at the bottom of page 3. I'll see if there's something that needs to be changed on that. Okay, I think I'm admitting our last board member.
Hey, Julie, this is Barbara. Can you hear me?
I can, Barbara. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. Sorry, my webcam isn't working, so I'm also calling in by phone. I'm the number that ends 2468.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, and you know,
Mhm.
your photo comes up when you're talking, so I can tell it's you.
That's good to know.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and get your meeting started for you. Welcome, Hope Advisory Board members and everybody else in attendance from the Benton County and Corvallis community. This is your September board meeting. I'm going to go ahead and bring up my screen. Give me just 1 second. Okay, let's put this in slideshow mode. Okay, sorry, I'm admitting a few more folks from the waiting room. Okay, so everybody, as you join, you should be muted, but you can unmute yourself when you're ready to share. Please keep yourself muted until you're ready to share or have a question. For anybody from the general public who's attending tonight and wants to do a public comment, if you can type into the chat, you just click on the little bubble that says chat and type your name and that you want to make a public comment. And I'll also give an opportunity for anybody on the phone to make a comment as well. There will be a time for a public comment right after I go over your agenda for today. Oh, sorry, one too fast. So here's your agenda. After public comment, we will be welcoming a new Hope Board member. I can't wait to introduce them to you. Some logistics with voting to approve your minutes from last month. And you have 2 guest speakers here for some board development on the topics of justice systems improvement. That's Nick Kurth, the program manager, working on that. And legislation is the second topic that you'll be learning about today. All the new exciting legislation that passed in 2021. Your second guest speaker is Allison McIntosh with Neighborhood Partnerships and the Housing Alliance. And then at the end, I will go over an update on the HOPE recommendations implementation and give you an update about any progress that's happening in the community or specifically on implementation of one of the HOPE recommendations. I'll go ahead and remind you all of the culture that you wanted to set and keep for your board with curiosity and inclusivity, transparency and kindness and respect and honesty. And thank you all for doing a great job of sticking to that culture that you wanted to set. So I'm going to go ahead and see if there's anybody who would like to make a public comment. I'll stop sharing for a second. I don't see anything in the chat. Are there any folks on the phone who would like to make a public comment? Please go ahead and unmute yourself. Now is the time. I'm only seeing one phone number, and I think that might be Barbara or Christina. So,
Julie, I'm seeing Susan raising her hand.
she must not be on my screen. Susan, thank you. Hi. Yes, Susan Malero Tripp, please go ahead and unmute yourself if you would like to make a public comment. If you can limit it to 2 to 3 minutes or so. Thank you so much.
I just want to introduce myself to the board again. I'm Susan Malero. I'm no longer Tripp anymore. My mom decided to take that off considering I'm not legally married to my husband.
I apologize, Susan. I will know for the future. Susan Malero, thank you so much.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm a self-advocate, and so one reason why I will be on the board, I mean, in the near future, is I want to be an advocate for other people with disabilities.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Was there anything else that you wanted to include in your public comment?
I'm also a college student, and I'm starting school next month on the 1st.
Well, congratulations on starting school. That's a fantastic achievement. Is there anything else you'd like to include with your public comment, Susan, before we move on?
That's basically it. I just want to learn about you guys. So if you have any questions for me, I don't mind to answer them.
Thank you, Susan. I don't think now's the time for our board members to ask you questions during public comment, but if board members do want to connect with Susan, please email me and I will put you in touch with her. Susan, thanks so much. I am not
very well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Anita also is saying in the chat, wonderful, Susan. I don't know if you can see the chat, Susan.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Annette.
All right, I don't see any others, but there was one person who joined via phone. Does anyone who is a caller on the phone from the general public want to make a public comment before we move on with the meeting? I am not seeing anyone unmute themselves, so I'm going to go ahead and screen share and move on with the rest of your meeting. Okay, so I sent out your meeting minutes from your August meeting. It sounds like there is a typo that I can correct that Jan Napak caught. Thank you, Jan, for being my English teacher parent when they're not here. I appreciate that. We need a motion from one of the board members to move to approve.
So moved. This is George.
Thank you,
Second.
George.
Second.
Was that Jan Napak?
Yes, second. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry you're not on my screen right now. Also, I'm sorry that it still says excused under Bruce Butler. This is from last month's slides, and I saw that you're already here, Bruce. I apologize for that. So there is a motion to approve your August meeting minutes. I'll use it as an opportunity to call roll as well. When I call your name, please unmute yourself and say aye or nay or abstain if you were not here last month. Flip Anderson.
Approve and present.
Thanks, Flip. Commissioner Ojero has an excused absence tonight. Catherine Bisco. Are you here with us, Catherine? I don't think I saw you. Hopefully she joins later. Carol Butcher.
Here and approved.
Bruce Butler.
Present and abstain.
Thank you. Brian Cotter. Okay, we can mark him as absent. Anita Earl.
Here and approved.
Thank you. Joel Goodwin.
Here and approved.
George Grosh.
Here and approved.
Barbara Hanley.
Here and approve.
Alita Hass-Holcomb. Oh, I believe Alita emailed me that she has a conflict tonight. You can mark her as an excused absence, Paula. I'm sorry, I forgot about that. Christina Jansilla, I know that you are here via phone. You've just texted me that you are here and you approve. If you can note that, Paula. Charles Mon.
Here and approved.
Peggy McGuire.
Here and abstain.
And Dharma Mirza is your new board member who we will introduce right after this vote, but I just want to note that you are here for a role.
Here, and I'm going to abstain on that vote too.
Yes, thank you. Jim Moorfield.
Here and approved.
Andrea Myrie.
Here and approved.
Jan Napak.
Here and approve.
Reese Stotzenberg.
Here and approved.
And Janie, are you here? She was going to try to call in, but she has an excused absence. I do not see her as joining. You can mark Janie as excused. She has a medical issue going on. Okay, your minutes have been approved. I am going to stop sharing for a second before we get to our educational speakers so that we can introduce Dharma, your new board member. After doing a lot of recruitment and outreach efforts and targeting specific communities. There were a couple of candidates and some who were not able to join the board, and thankfully Dharma is able to join the board and serve on it. So I will pass it over to you to introduce yourself to your fellow board members. Welcome.
Hello, colleagues. Hi, my name is Dharma Krishna, or Dharma is also fine. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a person with lived experience with homelessness. I guess to give some background on me, I am a Pakistani American dual citizen. I grew up in northern Utah, but I've been visiting Corvallis since 1999. My family's from the area. I've been living in Corvallis for the last about 10 years. I'm a student at Oregon State University. I recently graduated with my bachelor's in public health, queer studies, and medical humanities. And I'm currently a grad student in, I'm doing a master's of interdisciplinary studies in women, gender, sexuality studies and adult higher education, as well as a master's of public health in global health. I serve as the Equity and Justice Fellow for the Association of Recovery in Higher Education, and I'm also an Oversight and Accountability Council member for Oregon Measure 110, the drug decriminalization initiative here in the state. My research focuses on how health policies affect marginalized health communities, and beyond my scholarly experience serving marginalized communities such as Black and Indigenous communities of color and LGBTQ+ communities, I'm also a person of color. I'm disabled, I'm queer, trans, and intersex, and I'm a person in recovery as well, and I'm a harm reductionist. That's probably the short of it. But if anyone wants to connect with me further outside of the council, I'll drop my email in the chat. But I'm just excited to be here and hoping to bring a more diverse perspective and some lived experience to the council. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dharma. And you're seeing some welcoming comments in the chat from your fellow board members and some claps. They're all very happy to have you here. So thank you and welcome to the Hope Advisory Board. I also see that Brian Cotter is here. If you could go ahead and mark him in attendance, Paula. And Dharma, please look at the chat after you. Oh, good. You just put your email in there to hear all the welcome messages from your fellow board members. We're glad to have you here. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and segue to our, sorry, my head isn't working correctly today. Our educational speakers. We have two here for you today, and I'll go ahead and put their names up on the screen. Nick Kurth is going to be your first speaker, talking about the Justice Systems Improvement Program, and he is a program manager on this program for Benton County. And after he presents, there'll be time for question, and then we will have the presentation on the legislation on all these different housing topics. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing. And Nick, I'm going to pass over to you the controls. Give me just a second.
Thank you, Julie.
Okay. I think I have to make you the host.
Really?
I apologize. Or you know what? Go ahead and try to screen share. Let's see what
Yeah.
happens. I think you might be, there we go. I don't have to make you the host. Okay, good.
Okay, good. Thank you, Hope Advisory Committee, for the opportunity to talk tonight. And I'm going to straight away acknowledge that many of you have heard this presentation. The county is in its first round of public engagement. We'll have a second next spring. And I think we're doing a pretty good job, and which is why many of you have heard this presentation. This is actually one that I gave Monday night to the Courthouse City Council. And so I'm going to sprinkle it with some of the feedback that we've heard from the community and share that with you as I go through this, and then invite comment and questions. And I think what I'd like to do in the interest of time is I'm going to move through the whole presentation pretty quickly and then just open it up to Q&A. I have a couple of questions I'll invite feedback on, but your questions really take precedent. Additionally, I think Captain John Devaney may be joining us at 4:30. And so I'm starting a little bit early here, and he may pop on just as a heads up. So let's go ahead and get into this. You know, this vision, it's a simple sounding vision, not so simple to implement, but it really is about integrating treatment and accountability into our justice system to transform lives, ensure safety, and strengthen the community. And to the extent that the county is delivering on this vision already, it's really resonating with people. And that's one of the messages I shared with the Board of Commissioners, that you know, this has not been our vision in the past. In the past, when we had bond measures, it was focused on accountability. We weren't successful. And so we went back to the drawing board. Anyway, yeah, one of the themes I'm hearing much happily is that this is resonating with people. Our goal is to build an equitable and effective, safe justice system. And I'll talk a little bit about that equitability component here in a few minutes. I hope you're all familiar with the facilities that we're contemplating, the new facilities. You'll see I have a check mark by the Crisis Center, which is to provide behavioral health stabilization as well as resources. The check mark is there is because that piece of this puzzle has already been solved. We are going to have a crisis center downtown. Daniel Brown is leading that project piece of the greater program. It'll be in the Board of Commissioners office, and hoping to have doors open on that by early 2023. So really a great early win. Crisis Center, I think through all of my discussions dating back to last year when we formed our technical advisory committee and community advisory committee, was always at the top of the list. And really the message was, you can't have a new correctional facility without a crisis center. They work together. And so wonderful that we have that piece of the puzzle solved. But otherwise, we are contemplating a new correctional facility, new county courthouse, and sheriff's office with emergency operations. I think this is probably my favorite slide, and it does speak to really our vision. While the bond measure that we are contemplating for next year for new facilities is about bricks and mortar on the right side of the screen there. Really what people see and experience are the services and support that those facilities enable people to provide. And we are making as much of an effort and as big a stride as we can on that services and support side, even now, with the limitations of our facilities. And so, a couple of, for instances, enhanced crisis response, that's a reference to our new crisis outreach response and engagement pilot core. I'm assuming maybe Danielle has presented already, but that's a co-response model with behavioral health and law enforcement. It's part of the crisis continuum. And the wonderful news is that the core model, the crisis outreach, often requires a place to take people, and that's the crisis center. So we're really filling in some of the gaps in our system and doing that even before the bond measure. In addition, data evaluation and metrics, kind of a boring topic, but incredibly important. We need to be able to measure our success, and we need to be able to assure people that we're gonna implement equitably, and we're gonna be able to make continuous improvement. We've brought on Greater Oregon Behavioral Health. Ari Basil Wagner was my predecessor when the assessment was being conducted for the Justice System Improvement Program. And Gobi is eminently qualified to lead our data evaluation and metrics piece and get processes set up. So really happy to have that underway and looking to have data from that later this year and on an ongoing basis. Program timeline spans about a decade. I just want to point out that our bond measure has been pushed to November of 2022. We were planning to go in May and won't go into the details, but anyway, we're going to go in November. Actually a good thing. It allows us to have a whole second round of public engagement, and I'm looking forward to that. It's been really refreshing to have had so many interactions and gotten feedback, and yet we still have a lot of questions to discuss. This is a very complicated program, so the extra time is welcome. I just want to remind everybody that the phase we're in is pre-design, okay? We're not getting into the detailed design, which means, I don't have a lot of, pretty renderings or elevations to share with you. We're looking at concepts and sharing concepts with the public to get feedback. If the bond measure is successful, we'll move into design and implementation. The three public engagement questions that we've been asking are as follows, and I'm going to ask you to weigh in on a couple of these if time permits, but we've asked the public to rank the 4 facilities and tell us, how they rank them relative to the crisis center, sheriff's office and emergency operations, courthouse, and correctional facility. We've also asked them to weigh in on where should the courthouse be, whether on one of our suburban sites that we're contemplating or downtown. And then finally, talking a little bit about repurposing of the historic courthouse. In terms of key decisions that the county has to make and the timing, right now, the only decision that has to be made in the next really month and a half is choosing the suburban site for some number of facilities. And I'll share those sites with you and layouts here in just a minute. By mid-April of next year, we have to answer the much broader set of questions, and that will follow our second round of public engagement. So we'll need to decide, what's the suite of facilities that's in the bond? How are we going to fund those facilities, which could be from the bond, it could be from borrowing, it could be from additional grant and appropriations between now and then. So we need to kind of put that funding model together. We need to decide on a location for the new courthouse, and then we need to decide on a path for repurposing the historic courthouse. But the immediate decision is really our site selection, our suburban site selection. In terms of dollars and cents, we've had a number of bond appetite discussions, and from really the earliest days, we wanted to stay below 100 million. We're working hard to be as far below that as possible, and part of that will depend on what's in or out of the bond measure. We've also made really strong efforts and have results in terms of going after funds rather than transferring, that burden to taxpayers. So the crisis center is possible because through a combination of both state and federal earmarks, and that the $2.25 million that we've received to date will allow us to advance that remodel of the Board of Commissioners office on 5th Street. There's still another $800,000 that we're waiting to hear on. And there may be a small amount in the bond measure for a phase 2 expansion of the crisis center. We're working on the details of that right now. We also have received 20 million in matching funds, state matching funds. That was money that we went after in conjunction with OJD, Oregon Justice Department. And that's money that has to be spent on a new courthouse, not fixing, refurbishing the historic courthouse, but really happy to have that money to work with. At the end of the day, you can see we're still above $100 million on the cost side, and those costs are net of what we've received. So we're going to have to make some hard choices. Some things will be in, some things will be out. We may do some direct borrowing to bring down the cost, and all that will be worked out between really now and mid-April next year. I'm not going to go through this slide in detail, other than to say site selection was a data-driven, objective process, and arduous. Began in June of 2020 and is still ongoing. So the site that we're looking at for a downtown courthouse continues in negotiations. But we started with a very broad list of sites and ultimately weighed those against 32 factors and got down to what we have today, which is 3 properties, 1 downtown and 2 suburban. And now we're testing those sites with the public for their reaction and comment. So here's the sites. We have a site in the west, which is on Reservoir Road, kind of adjacent to the fairgrounds. The actual buildable area is down Reservoir Road and around the corner, so it's not even in the line of sight of the fairgrounds, but in proximity. South side is 65 acres of ryegrass to the west of Oregon 99 at Kiger Island. Downtown, I mentioned we're trying to purchase parking area adjacent to the Board of Commissioners office, which would give us almost 3/4 of that block, minus the Lumen CenturyLink building. That's still in negotiations. And if that falls through, we don't have a site for a downtown courthouse. You'll also notice there's an X up here. We were pursuing a site adjacent to Hewlett Packard. That ultimately fell through because the owner decided against selling. So in terms of amenities, the 2 sites, the 2 suburban sites are really pretty equal. Great operational efficiency if you put courthouse and correctional facility and sheriff's office all together. Great therapeutic settings, ample parking, plenty of room for expansion. And really, public transit even is in proximity. I've already met and talked with Corvallis Transit. And so downtown, of course, more of a civic setting. Many court activities are civic related. So people think of downtown. Ample public transit, not a whole lot of parking. If we do build downtown, we will provide more parking than there is today. So that's an improvement. But most importantly, I think, is economic vitality. By maintaining some of the justice system facilities downtown, we help with the economic vitality there. Okay, so concept 1, you put 3 of the facilities out on a campus on the west site with the crisis center downtown. And it could look like this. Again, this is just a test fit, so I don't want people to get hung up on what it looks like. This is just well, it is a fit to show that the facilities and the sizes contemplated could fit on this site and still have room for expansion. And this is the West Reservoir Road site. Concept 2, same kind of thing on the South Campus with the crisis center downtown. Here you have, court, DA, correctional facility, and sheriff's office on essentially a 15-acre of much bigger parcel, but taking up about 15 acres at Tiger Island Road. And then you can have a blended model where you have the courthouse downtown, correctional facility, and sheriff's office off-site. Looks something like this. And same on the south side. I will point out that one of the things we are strongly in favor of doing is returning the area where the existing jail sits to either all greenery or a combination of greenery and parking. Parking is much needed, but there's not going to be a building there anymore, which is really kind of a nod towards the historic heritage of this block and the historic courthouse. In terms of next steps, like I said, we're in our first round of public engagement. We've had one large public event. We're going to have the second on October 13th, and then by mid-November, the county has to enter into a purchase and sale agreement for one of the 2 suburban properties. Then looking ahead, funding plan by next summer. I mentioned the second round of public engagement, which will fall in the February to mid-April timeframe, and bond measure in November of 2022. And that's just our community meeting. And I think I'm going to wrap up right there and stop sharing my screen. And I won't be able to see everybody, so if you can help me out if there's hands raised or chat questions. I would like to hear from people. I'd like to hear any questions, but if you do have thoughts on the prioritization of the facilities, the new facilities that are proposed, that's one of the questions that we ask the public. And so would welcome hearing from you on that, as well as where do you think the new proposed courthouse should be located.
Thank you, Nick. Would you mind reminding us of the list of facilities to voice prioritization?
Sure. So again, crisis center, which is a done deal at this point, correctional facility, sheriff's office, possibly with an emergency operations center, and then the new courthouse.
Okay, so those 4.
Yep.
I saw George Grosh raise his hand first, and then Peggy McGuire.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
thank
George.
you. Yeah, just wondering, Nick, thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it. I like the direction that the county is taking with this. The question that I have is what consideration was given to reutilizing the law enforcement center site as it currently exists, with maybe using the rest of the block?
Yeah, actually quite a bit. There were many discussions both between DLR, who's our design and engineering consultant for the pre-design phase that we're in. We discussed it with the Community Advisory Committee and Technical Advisory Committee, as well as our internal operations team. And ultimately the challenge that we faced, and so the early designs actually did contemplate using that whole block. What we kept running up against was, there's a lot of valuable services and support in the Cascade Apartments, which provides, transitional housing, and our drug treatment court on that block. And so were we to tear it down, we'd have to go build it somewhere else. And so ultimately, even the commissioners weighed in and just said, it doesn't make sense to tear one thing down to build something new, to then have to turn around and provide that service and support somewhere else. And especially downtown, securing space has been extremely difficult. We had 5 downtown sites that we were exploring. Originally, we wanted to have a whole campus site downtown. That was our goal, was to have a possibility of a whole campus downtown. And we simply could not secure the space. And, as I mentioned, even now, we may not have a space for just even the courthouse. And so that was the challenge, really, was finding appropriate size space that an owner was willing to, part with.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Nick. I guess Peggy did not have her hand raised. I'm going to scroll over to the other side of the screen. Does anybody else have questions for Nick? Carol, and then Jim.
Myself. Hi, thanks for your presentation. It was good, and I really like the idea of I like the idea of locating out on Reservoir Road. I think that's pretty cool. The old courthouse, I have real issues about that, and it feels to me that it has, it has a potential for. I mean, I guess it's in the bond because people have these attachment to it, but it's a pretty funky building. And is there some concept about maybe selling it to a private investor who might want to spend the money reinvesting or renovating it and turning it into office buildings, or a campus, a series of stores, or something that's private, and just get it away from the city? I know people love that thing, but it's a difficult building to renovate.
It is indeed. And yes, we have very much explored kind of what you're talking about there and are actively doing so. So the historic courthouse may not be in the bond measure. And in fact, the third question that we asked the public is about repurposing the historic courthouse. And so one option is, to keep the DA there, but that's about an incremental $20 million. Another option is to do seismic upgrades, and some other, mechanical upgrades, around $12 to $15 million, but take the courthouse in a new direction, not use it for the justice system anymore. Third is to not burden the bond with the historic courthouse, but to still take the courthouse in a new direction. We're not going to tear it down. The county is committed to, maintaining it. And to that end, we have put the historic courthouse under the guidance and direction of Lynn McKee, who is our natural areas parks and events coordinator. She was formerly a curator for the FBI and has a number of historic properties in Benton County under her management. So perfect fit there. We then also commissioned a feasibility study to look at some of these private-public partnerships. I don't think the county, and I haven't seen the final report yet. It's due. We're going to share it with the commissioners in November. I don't know that we're contemplating actually parting with it outright, but more of a partnership. And that actually opens up grant opportunities that the county as a public entity can't pursue, but a private entity can. And so we're going to be taking a hard look at, could we use this for arts and entertainment? Could it be, much needed conference space, office space, other types of civic uses outside of the justice system? But that'll be the discussion we'll have probably fairly soon. The direction we take the historic courthouse in maybe the next decision that the commissioners make.
So is this person that you mentioned, there are counties that have taken their courthouse and privatized them. I think Multnomah has, and I think there's a couple of in Eastern Oregon and Southern that have done that. Is that just off the table? The concept of privatizing it, just selling it to a big developer to do whatever they want to do with it?
I'm not going to say it's off the table. I would say I'm really waiting to see the results of the feasibility study, and DLR has, again, our design consultant for pre-design, they have been involved in a number of those projects. They have a historian or historical engineer on their team, and she and I have interacted. She's been part of this process. So I'm just really waiting to see what the recommendations are. We just haven't gotten to that level of discussion with the commissioner. I was just kind of sharing that I haven't heard a lot of discussion about, wholly selling it, but I'm not saying that that isn't possible.
Thanks, Nick. I think Jim Moorfield is next.
Okay.
Hi, Nick. Thank you. So this would be whenever the vote for the bond measure comes up, it'll be, I forget what number of attempts that have been made over the years, but they go back. Yeah, it goes back quite a ways, and I think there's a long list of reasons why it's been no so far. On the list of reasons, I don't know that it's necessarily the most important, but it's on the list, is a certain amount of community ambivalence about the idea of incarceration as the solution to criminal justice challenges. I don't see it that black and white, just to be clear. I'm not stating my opinion. I'm just saying that there's a sentiment out there that is concerned. I've also talked to leaders in the criminal justice system who've talked about the relationship between more services that work more effectively in its relationship to having jail as an option to a degree we don't have today. And basically the selling point was that we can do a better job in treatment. We can do a better job with reintroducing people to the community once they've been jailed if we have an enhanced facility. So my question, and that makes sense to me, but my question, when I see proposals that talk about the facility, the bricks and mortar, I'm not seeing the story being told about the relationship between accomplishing that and doing a better job with those services that also help make our community safer and also actually help people turn their lives around. And that is a big issue, since we're here talking about homelessness, is trying to be non-punitive about these at the same time that we hold people accountable and so on. Is there anything about the operating budget of the county's operating budget for the facility or for all the services involved that the county provides that would change? Or are there any enhancements envisioned? Or how would that get paid for? How would the ability to provide supportive services change with these facilities?
Sure. All good questions. I think there were several in there, but I think first of all, I went through this presentation very quickly. On the services and support slide, there was a bullet point that referred to in custody treatment programs. And you are absolutely correct. There is nobody that's involved in the justice system improvement program, and especially the sheriff's office, that is interested in maintaining our status quo today, which is today we essentially just warehouse adults in custody. We're providing almost no treatment opportunity for lack of space. I mean, even to conduct the most basic space, and part of it is also having enough adults in custody to participate in programs together and to bring somebody in and do training, et cetera. Our solution right now is we are outsourcing our jail beds, right? We send more than half of our adults in custody out of the county. And that does not even remotely align with, best practices. One of the, primary ways to drive down recidivism is to have a strong support network. And, whether that's friends, family, children, parents, and the reason, and to have a support network that can visit adults in custody regularly. We make that very difficult when we send somebody 2.5, 3 hours away to the Dells. But that aside, yes. So, you know, we have 4 to 5 years before doors will be open on, hopefully open on a new correctional facility. And I use that word very purposely, a correctional facility. Last night we presented to the NAACP and had a wonderful meeting. It lasted 2 hours, almost till 9 o'clock at night. And the final question that Jason Dorsett, the president of the NAACP, asked me was, you know, Nick, can you commit to in-custody treatment programs? And, you know, I said, Jason, absolutely. I can commit. The sheriff committed, Joe Kirby committed. And the follow-on was, you know, are you willing to make tough choices to fund that? And again, yes, yes, yes. It'll be a complete failure if we create a larger facility, you know, only just to do warehousing. That just doesn't float anybody's boat. You know, it's contrary to our entire vision. And so in terms of, you know, funding mechanisms, I'm already now looking at, okay, what are the programs we want to offer? How are we going to pay for them? And that also needs to be answered before the commissioners make some of their choices. And so even though it's an event 4 to 5 years away, for instance, if you look at, you know, where is this, where do we locate the new courthouse? Public sentiment is leaning towards downtown, and I get that completely. City of Corvallis would like us to have it downtown. I get that as well. But the reality is it's going to cost about $450,000 to $500,000 a year more to have the courthouse separate from the correctional facility, because you're routinely transporting people for court dates, right? They need to consider that, because you're right, we have to pay for in-custody treatment programs. It's at the top of our list. So I hope I've addressed your question, and I absolutely agree that you know, some of our past efforts, I would say all of our past efforts have simply not, you know, found the right balance between treatment and accountability. I think we're on the right path now. And we'll learn more, you know, over the next 9 months.
Thanks, Nick. That was really informative. Jim, did you want to follow up on your question at all?
Yeah, I suppose so. It was a long question. Thank you for your patience. I'll simplify it. So are you saying that it will likely require an increase in FTE, and that the conversation is ongoing about how to pay for that?
Oh, it'll certainly require an increase in FTE. And there'll be some savings at the same time. You know, we're spending over $1 million a year right now to rent jailbirds, so we won't be spending that money.
Hey, Nick, can I just interject for anybody on the call? FTE means full-time employee. It means staff members.
Yeah, right. It means people, right, working full-time. So, you know, there will definitely be an increase, and we definitely need to know how to fund that, which is why I'm studying that already. We don't want to go galloping down the road and say we're going to do things that we don't know how to pay for. And, you know, the primary funding of operations in the justice system is either the Public Health and Safety Local Option Levy or the general fund. And so, you know, we can predict what the local option levy will bring in, and, you know, back into solutions from that. We just renewed the Public Health and Safety Local Option Levy in May. It was the 3rd renewal, so we haven't changed the rate in 15 years. And, you know, I don't know what's going to happen another, well, it's 6 years hence. Could the rate change? Yeah, the rate could change. Could we maintain the rate? I would say we're certainly going to try and maintain the rate. But yeah, to do to do these things, we're going to need more people. And part of the solution is figuring out how to pay for that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. George, I saw that you had another question, but I want to make sure we give an opportunity to other board members if other board members have a question who haven't asked one yet. I'm looking around. Are there other board members who have a question for Nick or Captain Devaney? I see that Captain John Devaney has joined us as well.
Great.
I have a question.
Yeah, Dharma, go ahead.
I was wondering, which of the proposed options has the least environmental impact? But then additionally to, I guess, just raising concerns that a removal of the courthouse from a central location would disadvantage our most underprivileged citizens who may have less access to transportation options to get further away from central downtown. I just feel like the courthouse being more central to a transit hub makes more sense for our most marginalized individuals who may need access to the courthouse more frequently than the law enforcement center, right? And so I guess for me, the split models looked more beneficial despite the cost of the increased transport between the locations. But I'm wondering, additionally to has there been like an accessibility analysis of the access to those areas beyond public transit, right? Is the infrastructure set up so that folks can physically get to there in equitable ways?
Yeah, we definitely have looked at the transportation options, and so in terms of accessibility, I think they're both good. Certainly the west site is more central in nature if you think holistically about the county. And south obviously is, south. We are also conducting traffic studies, which is more about impact than it is about accessibility. But, there are multimodal paths in proximity. There are multimodal paths that are to be extended, at least on the south property. What else? I do think public transit is key, and as I mentioned, I've already met with CTS, Courthouse Transit, and talked about either extending bus routes or potentially having an intergovernmental shuttle, and that we've actually talked about. We may put $100,000 in the bond for a van. So that CTS could operate an intergovernmental shuttle. We have time to work out those details. So I don't know if that's exactly answered your question. In terms of environmental impact, no, there's not really a dramatic difference. I guess in part it depends on how you feel about wetlands. And so the south side is almost entirely wetlands, which would have to be mitigated. And it would be mitigated by buying credits, which means wetlands are created somewhere else. And we're paying for that to happen somewhere else. On-site mitigation was actually studied and discounted, not based on cost, but because it does not align with best practices. And so buying credits was actually the recommended path forward. The west site has a beautiful wetlands area that is protected, but the site that we're developing is all upland. So I guess you could argue there's less environmental impact on the west site than on the south site. Downtown, you're going to have to build vertically downtown. And so that's a question of, how you feel about tall vertical buildings, really. Environmentally, most of that block has been developed anyway. So that's the best that I can answer with that right now.
Thanks so much, Nick. George, I'll circle back to you then. I don't see any other board members who have questions. Oh, and George, you need to unmute yourself. After you go, George, there's a couple of questions in the chat that we might have time to get to, depending on this last question from from George, so go ahead.
I will be brief because it's probably as much a comment as it is a question, because I wanted to kind of piggyback on what Jim was alluding to. I was one of the people on the past bond measures that have been firmly in the this is not the right time or the right place camp of that. I'm feeling much better about this. And the reason I'm feeling better is because I thought everything that's previously come before this has been far more focused on the punitive aspects of corrections than the restorative aspects of corrections.
Yeah.
And this shows me the beginnings that we're moving in that direction of restorative ideals around justice rather than just punitive ideals around justice. And I think it fits, the timing is much better because it fits very well with what I see the work that this committee's been doing and the commitment that the county has recently been making to increasing mental health capacity, particularly through the crisis center and the hiring of new people to deal with the populations that are here. So for me, who's been anti-jail facility all along, I'm more in the camp now that says this, wherever you decide to site it, I'd certainly have a preference for downtown as much as possible, but I understand the constraints that the county has to deal with in terms of dealing with it and accept that. So I would just say the more that we can focus directive services, direct treatment services to people in the downtown core, I think the better off you would be. As far as where the police facility is in the emergency center and the actual corrections facility, I don't think that makes quite as much difference as trying to keep the direct services piece downtown. And I appreciate the direction that you're going with this. I think it's that merging that focus on intervention and treatment as opposed to just punitive aspects is going to serve well this time around.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, George. I just want to take a second to look at the chat. I think you answered one of the public attendees' questions. Paul Richard, you had asked about traffic impact studies for the suburban sites, particularly the west site. Nick, you touched a bit on traffic impact and environmental impact, but did you want to extrapolate any more on any traffic impact for the west site?
Well, I do see there is a question about easiest access, and DLR did study the transit time for both sites, and while the south site is more direct, it actually takes almost the exact same amount of time to get downtown from west or south, and so we feel pretty good about their relative locations. I do know the sheriff has commented from the standpoint of his department responding to calls. The west site offers, better distribution if you're heading to Philomath or Alsea, and people sometimes forget that sheriff's office covers the entire county. And Courthouse Police Department, which would remain downtown in the current law enforcement building, is limited to city limits essentially. So our paradigm is getting to all points of the county at any one time. I think the other thought, the other consideration with the south side is there is the potentiality for it to get cut off. And I'm not thinking about routine access, but the Marys River can flood and basically create an island out of South Corvallis. So that's a consideration. I'm looking at some of the other, go ahead and pick whichever questions you want me to answer from the chat.
Sure. More, there was one about making sure there's access and programs and services for people with disabilities.
Okay.
I'm guessing you are factoring that in, but would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, so I mean, much of those facilities considerations come into effect when you get into actual design. But I will say that developmental disabilities training relative to law enforcement, is one of our key deliverables on the support and services side. And in fact, we budgeted for training, we had a date set, COVID hit. So now we're just waiting, for the opportunity to be able to gather in large numbers. This is something that John Gottschall and the ARC have arranged and have already discussed with both CPD and BCSO, Albany Police Department, and I think OSU as well. And so we're just looking forward to conducting the training. We've also done some communications card training for members of our public who have developmental disabilities. This is a card that they can show law enforcement describes more about who they are. And I know that COM card training took place with CPD prior to COVID, and I don't think it happened once COVID hit with BCSO, but another thing we want to do and are ready to do. So looking forward to that.
Thanks, Nick. The last comment from Dharma Krishna, just mirroring the NAACP suggestion about commitment to in-custody treatment and services. I think that was also echoed by Jim and George too, and focusing on facilities that reduce recidivism and incarceration rates. Yeah, I don't know if you want to touch upon that again.
Well, I do want to really touch on, when people hear, okay, that we're proposing a 120 bed facility. People say, well, why do that? Why not continue to rent beds out of county, or why 120 beds? And it raises eyebrows, and I understand that. What I will say about that is, we're building for a 20-year horizon. We're not building for right today. If you have a 120 bed facility, that means you can have about 96 beds filled at any one time. Correctional facilities never operate above 80%. And so that's sort of the realistic capacity there. And also, if we do a really good job, if we do a good job with our crisis continuum, if we do a good job with reducing recidivism, if we do a good job with our pretrial services, and these are all objectives, we may find ourselves in a situation where we don't fill all those beds immediately, right? That'd be a great thing, because we can always turn around and rent those beds. I guarantee you the demand is there. We just as a county rented 10 beds from Polk County for pretrial defendants, but those beds aren't guaranteed, and they could easily be taken away from us. It's clear that in the 5-county area, there's demand for beds. The other point I really do want to make is, again, or just to emphasize that bringing our adults in custody back to the places where they were sentenced and incarcerated is a best practice. Outsourcing your beds is undermining your efforts to reduce recidivism. And it's undermining our efforts to really offer more programs. And again, I talked about having critical mass, and the goal isn't to, have critical mass, but it's a reality of conducting programs. You need to have more than one inmate generally to have, a fundable treatment program. And so anyway, one of many reasons for bringing those beds back to the county.
John, Captain Devaney, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, one of the things, I know Nick touched on pretrial a little bit, but one of the things that we are currently working on is actually a cooperative agreement between ourselves and Lynn County. So that, because effectively with the jail our size, we really can't go after federal grant funding. And when we were looking at doing the pretrial program that we're currently starting, we looked at the way that Lincoln County is doing it. Lincoln County currently has federal grant funding that comes and helps them provide phones to folks that don't have phones. They pay for a pretrial house, so when people don't have a place to stay when they get out of custody, they have a place where they can go and stay, start getting into their treatment programs and all that type of stuff, and then hopefully move on to other options for them. And myself and Lieutenant Jewell from the jail attended the American Jail Association conference this year, and they had like 6 different classes on reentry. And there's about, I think I saw this year, 7 to 8 grants about reentry from correctional facilities. So because ourselves and Lynn County share so many of the same people because of our proximity to each other, especially Corvallis and Albany, we decided to go in, and we've already met, Sheriff and I have already met with Sheriff Yan and the Joe Commander over in Lincoln and are putting together a memorandum of understanding so that we can create a regional approach to this so that we can go after grant funding, be able to help some of our private sector providers be able to provide housing vouchers, things like that to people that are getting out of custody, or cell phones the way that Lincoln County is doing. Currently, they use Cricket Wireless out in Lincoln County, and they pay for the plans while the people are on pretrial so that the court reminders that they're sending out, people can get them. So that's some of the services that we're looking at to try to cut down on that recidivism, the revolving door as we're going forward. And, you know, it's something that both myself and the folks from Lane County and the sheriff are very dedicated in trying to do, because it's sort of funny when the sheriff left the county for however many years to go out to Baker and work out there, he comes back and our jail population, he probably could have seen the exact same names from when he left from back in 2015, 2016. So it didn't really change much. So the idea of, again, warehousing just hasn't worked. So we have to try some other options. And I think that's the direction that we're going. And we also are starting to work much more closely with mental health, and obviously with a crisis center, that's much easier to say, all right, when somebody's ready to get out of custody, but they're not quite ready to be completely out of custody, the crisis center will be an option for them to go get some setups and some help identified for them prior to completely going out and just not having any of that around them. And again, probably coming right back through the door. So.
Thank you, Captain Devaney. One more comment on this about really a need for more comprehensive substance use disorder treatment and behavioral health treatment to prevent instead of, you know, reacting once someone has already in the law enforcement system. I don't know if we have time to tackle that big of a topic today, Dharma Krishna, but I do know that behavioral health treatment and having more access to it is something that this board wants to learn more about. Well, I'm going to go ahead and thank Nick and John for being here tonight and for all of your information, and I will send out the slides to the board afterward so that you have all of the info that Nick shared tonight. And if you have any other questions, please let me know and I can connect you directly with Nick or other opportunities and public forums that you can attend and give feedback.
Thank you so much.
Julie, this is Barbara.
Yes, hi.
Sorry. Hi, sorry, I was trying to ask a question earlier and was having trouble getting off mute.
Oh, okay.
I was just curious if any of the land that's up by Samaritan Hospital was considered in the siting of the facilities.
I have to say I'm not familiar with the exact land that you're referring to. I will say the top line cut, the first cut that gave us the 40 plus sites was that we wouldn't consider any sites that weren't in or immediately adjacent to the urban growth boundary. And they had to have at least 15 acres or more. And so, you know, I don't know if that applies to the Samaritan land. But I will say that it was a pretty thorough and exhaustive study, and no geographic location was discounted for one reason or another. So I feel pretty confident based on the job that both DLR did and our commercial real estate broker that everything that would pass that top line cut did. And so that's the best that I can answer, I'm afraid.
No, thank you, Nick. I appreciate it. It was, like I said, I tried to ask this question earlier and I was having some technical issues.
Okay.
That's okay. Thanks, Barbara. Well, Nick and John, you can go ahead and sign off if you'd like.
Okay.
I'd like to invite anybody attending to go ahead and stand up. We're going to stretch our legs for about 30 seconds before we shift gears. And invite Allison to introduce herself because that was a lot of information. So stand up, stretch out. At least I need to. Yes, you too, Allison. Go ahead. And that was a wonderful presentation. And Dharma, I'm sorry to sideline your question. It goes a bit beyond Nick and John's purview, but it is an important topic and one that I know is important to most of the other board members, and something we might follow up on as far as educational opportunities for what our substance use disorder treatment system looks like. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and screen share just so you all can see who I'm introducing here. Thanks, Nick, for being here. And next up is our guest speaker, Allison McIntosh, who's the Policy and Communications Director with Neighborhood Partnerships. And she shared 3 links with me that I emailed out to the board last week prior to this meeting. I've included them here again, and they're great resources for more detailed information on everything that was passed this last session. But I'll go ahead and stop sharing and go ahead and let Allison introduce herself. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. Thanks, Julie. Like Julie said, I'm Allison McIntosh. I work for Neighborhood Partnerships, and my role there is to convene a coalition called the Oregon Housing Alliance. It's really nice to see some familiar faces and local housing advocates. The Housing Alliance is a coalition of about 90 organizations, and we believe that everyone deserves a safe, stable, and affordable place to call home. We're a legislative advocacy coalition, so every year we used to sit around a table actually in person, but now we just sit in these little squares and talk about what the pressing needs are in our community and what we're going to do to solve those problems. And we work on issues related to people experiencing homelessness, tenants, people who rent their homes, and what barriers or circumstances they might be finding, how we build more affordable housing, as well as homeownership, how we help people both access homeownership and maintain homeownership. We are pretty focused on what I would call regulated affordable housing. I'm going to try really hard not to be too wonky tonight, but I'm a little bit of a nerd, so Julie will stop me if I get too into the weeds. When I talk about regulated affordable housing, I mean housing like what Jim used to work on back when Willamette Neighborhood Housing was Willamette Neighborhood Housing. Now it's Dev Northwest, but housing that's built with public dollars, government resources, and it's restricted for folks based on like people with low incomes and certain income levels. And that's where we mostly focus our time and energy as a coalition, because we know that we don't have enough safe, stable, and affordable places to call home for people in our community. Seniors, people with disabilities, families with young kids, anybody. There's so many stories all across Oregon of people really struggling to find affordable housing and the housing instability that kind of comes from that. And I know you all know that your community is experiencing those things as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened in 2021. I will say it was a pretty exciting legislative session from a housing advocate perspective. The need is overwhelming, and legislators certainly understand that the need for action was significant and it needed to be bold. And I'm really pleased to see the ways in which the legislature stepped up. I think this has been one of several really amazing legislative sessions where the legislature is addressing short-term needs for people experiencing homelessness. They're trying to take steps that are kind of medium-term solutions, like investing more money in building affordable housing. And they're taking long-term steps as well and making changes to the way we build affordable housing or the way we site shelters that will impact communities for years to come. So I'm going to try not to get too detailed, but I'm happy to answer questions. And I'm going to try to give you some highlights of things that I think might be of interest, but I'm happy to answer questions about anything that was in the blog posts or anything else I can try to answer, or I can dig it up later and send it to Julie. So I'm going to start talking about homelessness, and we'll move kind of through some other topics as we go. So related to homelessness, there was quite a few things that the legislature did. We have 2 state pots of money that can be used to fund shelter or to fund emergency rent assistance. And those two pots of money go to community action agencies. So Peggy is here from Community Services Consortium. Hi, Peggy. And those funds go directly to her agency to meet needs in local communities. And just like 17 other organizations all around the state that are doing similar good work. The legislature continued to invest in those programs. We were hoping for an increase, but there was also a pretty significant infusion of federal dollars, as Peggy will, I'm sure, tell you, that meant that the legislature just kind of invested the kind of status quo funding. They did invest $27 million, though, in funds for emergency shelter, which is a pretty significant increase in state funds. And that would be to stand up either maybe a winter warming shelter, maybe a year-round shelter, really emergency resources for folks experiencing homelessness. We don't yet know. Yeah, Julie.
Allison, as you're going through this, if there is a timeline for when local
Yes.
areas can apply for these like 27 million in sheltering for the whole state of Oregon, like, is that happening this fall or in 2022, or do we have no idea yet? Instead of getting to the timelines after you cover the topics, if there are any timelines that you can interject, I know this crew would be interested.
Awesome, great. So for the 27 million, I have not heard implementation plan yet. My understanding, though, is that they will be distributing those resources before this winter, so that at least a portion of those resources are available for this winter shelter. In 2018, the Housing and Community Services Department hired a consultant to conduct what's called a statewide shelter study, which was really looking across the state at capacity and need for emergency shelters. And my understanding is that they're going to continue to use the data that they found in that shelter to address needs, but we can certainly find some more information. And Peggy, you should feel free to chime in when you know more than I do, which is a lot of the time. So.
Listen, you are doing a great job. Go for it.
Awesome. Thank you. They passed two other bills that I wanted to highlight for you all that are specifically related to youth experiencing homelessness. So Oregon has a network of youth providers who are providing services to youth who are unaccompanied and experiencing homelessness. They may be shelter services, they may be other support services. The legislature invested $3.6 million in kind of those ongoing operations, and those will go out to an existing network of providers. They did also, though, invest some new dollars, which was pretty exciting. House Bill 2163 invests $4.5 million in a pilot program to provide ongoing rent assistance for youth experiencing homelessness. Ongoing rent assistance is one of the most critical interventions, right? For folks with low incomes, somebody who is going to help pay the rent until they can get back on their feet, or as long as it takes. That money really keeps people stable in housing. And so this $4.5 million is going to be a pilot that we hope can be greatly expanded because the need is significant. This would serve youth who may be experiencing homelessness because they left their foster care home, maybe they came out of incarceration, maybe they ran away from a bad family situation. It's not specific to that. The Housing and Community Services will pick, I think, 4 communities to do this pilot program in, although we are hearing early reports that in 2022, some people might want to try to expand that so that it's more than just 4 communities. Don't expect that money to come out anytime soon. We think it's going to be probably next spring before they really start talking about the program design and everything, but certainly we'll keep Julie posted. I think it's also worth mentioning, and I don't have an implementation timeline for this one either, but related to homelessness, the legislature also allocated $10 million to support what's called a mobile crisis intervention team. So for those of you that are familiar with Cahoots down in Eugene, it's kind of a 911 alternative for folks who might be experiencing mental health issues or experiencing homelessness who need maybe a different intervention, right? Something is happening. They are on the street, in public, in a park, wherever they are, and they need help, but maybe they don't need a uniformed officer, maybe they need a social worker or a mental health specialist. This would be a matching program, a matching grant program for communities to stand up these kind of mobile crisis intervention teams. The Oregon Health Authority is going to be implementing that, so it's a little bit outside my experience, but I'm happy to try to dig up exactly when they're going to implement that program if that's of interest to folks. And then the last thing that I'm going to mention about homelessness is the legislature passed a bill that I think is going to be of interest to you all. It's House Bill 2006. It's a temporary provision, so it's going to last until July 1st of 2022, and it removes barriers to siting shelters in communities. So many of you probably remember the struggles that communities all across the state, including Corvallis, have had in siting shelters. Anytime you file a land use application, it results in process, right? Neighbors, businesses, everybody gets their say about whether a shelter can be in this community. This law would basically say for the next year, if a shelter meets building codes and it is safe for the people who are going to be staying in the shelter, a local government cannot deny an application for a shelter. So it's an opportunity for shelter providers to site shelters and keep them in operation without going through some of the hurdles that can really derail emergency shelters. So happy to say more about that. But I'm going to move now to talking about people who rent their homes. So the legislature passed a couple of bills. The primary ones that I'm going to talk about are really related to the COVID emergency. So Oregon allowed its eviction moratorium that was because of COVID to expire on June 30th, and the legislature put in place some basic protections. The first and most important one is that if you're a renter and you applied for rent assistance and you notify your landlord that you've applied for rent assistance because you can't pay your current month's rent, it puts a pause on eviction proceedings for 60 days while you move through the application process. We know that there are more people who need emergency rent assistance than in a really long time because of COVID, and it has created a huge demand. There is resources to help meet that demand, but we need time to be able to get folks through that application and to process applications. And so Senate Bill 278 basically creates a 60-day pause. Another bill that passed, Senate Bill 282, provides some ongoing protections. So for folks who were not able to pay rent at any time during the emergency period, which is April of 2020 through June of 2021, they have until March to pay any of that back rent. They cannot be evicted right now for any of that back rent. They need to either be able to pay their current month's rent or be applying for rent assistance. It also creates an opportunity for folks to expunge evictions if they do get evicted during this COVID emergency period. It allows people to double up, so to share housing without being penalized by their landlord. And it provides some protection. We have heard some situations in which people are getting kind of retaliatory evictions. So it creates some additional protections for that. Related to a conversation that I heard earlier, I wanted to mention the legislature also passed Senate Bill 291, really important for folks who are coming out of the correction system. Basically creates a process where somebody can ask for what's called an individual assessment. And so that's basically, if it were me applying to a landlord, I would say, maybe I've had a criminal history in my past. I would like a chance to explain that. I can show you like whatever I have, right? Maybe a proof. Maybe I've spent a lot of time trying to fix the problem that I created. Maybe it was 10 years ago. Maybe I was really young when it happened. Maybe my life circumstances have changed, but it basically asks a landlord to consider somebody's individual circumstances rather than just denying them for criminal history. And that's an opportunity for folks with criminal history to be able to get back into housing. And it asks the landlord to provide that individual assessment and to look at the whole circumstances of someone's kind of life events. That bill is going to go into effect in January. We are hoping that some of our community partners will do some really great educational materials And I'll be sure to send those to Julie when those are available. So that's what happened for folks who rent their homes. I'm going to talk a little bit about building affordable housing, which is a lot of money things, which is exciting. For the past, let's see, since 2015, the state has been using general obligation bonds to build affordable housing. So that's housing that is affordable to people with low incomes in communities all across the state. And affordable housing providers like Dev Northwest or the Lynn Benton Housing Authority go and apply to Oregon Housing and Community Services. And they say, I own a piece of land. I would like to build a building. It's going to have this many units. Here's what it's going to be like. Please, I need some resources. And in the first year of this program, the legislature put in about $40 million. This past year, they committed $410 million, which is really exciting. It's more money than they've ever committed to build affordable housing before. It's not going to solve the problem immediately overnight, right? Like, this is a long-term strategy where developers are going to apply, and it's probably Jim, 2 or 3 years before any buildings will actually open to people who need them, but it's going to make a real difference in communities as these units start to be built. And I just am really excited to see the level and scale of investment that's going to make a huge difference in communities all across the state. It is going to be both for a regular affordable housing as well as something called permanent supportive housing. That is housing that is built for people who maybe have experienced homelessness, and they may have mental health issues, they may have addiction issues, they may have serious physical health challenges, and permanent supportive housing takes housing that is deeply affordable for people with low incomes and pairs services with those housing units. So it brings both of them together. So it's exciting to see the state invest in that type of housing. And it includes rent assistance and service dollars as well. So really exciting steps forward. It's a baby step, but I think it's pretty exciting to see the state commit this level of resource. Just a quick mention, we also saw a pretty big investment in existing affordable housing. Sometimes affordable housing needs a new roof or new windows or new carpet, and those things all require investment by the legislature. So excited to see that as well. I also want to tell you about a bill that they passed that I was really excited about. It was called Senate Bill 8. It's going to make it easier to build affordable housing in communities across the state. So it would allow affordable housing to be built in areas that are zoned for commercial land, publicly owned land, or religiously owned land. So if a church owns an extra parcel or they have extra land, you could build affordable housing on there. And it would basically, this is going to get a little wonky, it's basically going to skip some of the rezoning process that's really hard and create what we would call by right affordable housing development. So skip some of the really difficult parts and go straight to the building permits. That will save a ton of time, and it will open up more land to be used for affordable housing. It's really exciting. It's a long-term strategy, but let's see. I would also just mention the legislature increased funding for housing for agricultural workers and their families. And then they also put in $10 million for a pilot that might, that would allow affordable housing to be built with early learning facilities, so like childcare or preschools on site. So that's pretty exciting. And we still have some to figure out. Really quick, I'm just going to talk about homeownership really briefly. I think it's really important that everybody know Oregon still has a foreclosure moratorium, so homeowners cannot be foreclosed on right now in most circumstances. That's going to last through the end of the year. Also increased money for counseling. So if somebody is having trouble making their mortgage payments, there are folks that they can reach out to who can help them walk through that with their servicer. Dev Northwest provides that service. And there is federal money coming. There's $90 million that the state got that will help people become current on their mortgage or pay their current mortgage if they can't pay it right now. So, and that program isn't yet open. It's supposed to open in November. two other quick things, and then I'm going to stop talking. The legislature also invested $20 million in basic health and safety repairs. So sometimes we know homeowners with low incomes might not be able to maintain their home, or maybe they need like accessibility modifications, maybe a ramp or grab bars or doorways widened if they're in a wheelchair. And the legislature put in $20 million for that purpose, which is really exciting. And then also some additional funds to replace aging manufactured homes. Oregon has a ton of really old manufactured homes, which are really terrible to heat and cool and can be really unhealthy and really unsafe. So the legislature created a program and added some money that would help homeowners replace those homes at a really low cost. So some really exciting things that happened, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you for all that overview. And I do encourage any board members or folks on the call to click on the blog links, and they'll be available on the HOPE website as part of this presentation if you want to see all the different bills that Allison was talking about and some analysis of them. Jim, go for it.
Hi, Allison. First a comment. I hope everybody in this meeting understands that our guest today over the last decade or so has had such a major role in increasing the resources available to address homelessness and affordable housing in our state. I mean, for the LIFT program alone to go from 40 million to 410, Allison is on the short list of people who made that happen. So thank you, Allison. So this is the question. The good news is that the LIFT program, which is to create more affordable housing, including permanent supportive housing, has had a big increase over the years. The part that worries me, since I used to run an affordable housing development program, is the capacity of our state's organizations to actually deploy those resources. And I know just from people I still talk to in my retirement that a lot of out-of-state organizations are kind of moving into Oregon because they're seeing an opportunity. So that's a good thing in a lot of ways. What worries me about it, since this is an advisory board addressing homelessness, is that the right kind of housing be developed. Obviously, we need more supply. That's a good thing, but we also need the right kind of supply if we're especially going to address problems like homelessness. Do you have any observations about that?
Thanks, Jim. So nice to see you today. I totally agree, right? We need more affordable housing. We need more people to do this work. We need to invest in the capacity of local organizations, and we need to figure out how to address homelessness. I have a few thoughts. I think LIFT, obviously by itself is not going to end homelessness in our communities. We need additional tools. And I think you probably know better than most that LIFT is really targeted towards folks who maybe are working, right? It's not super high income folks. It's probably minimum wage earners, part-time minimum wage earners, but it is not targeted towards people with zero income or people who are living with just Social Security or SSDI. We need some additional tools. I think the investment in permanent supportive housing is really exciting because it actually does serve people who are directly exiting homelessness or who have really very extremely low incomes. One of the things that I'm really excited about, and I'll just put in a plug for you all to call your Congress people and your senator, is that the federal government right now is considering bigger investments in affordable housing than I have ever seen, including the possibility of a lot of new housing choice vouchers. I think the data that I saw said that if the package passed as is, Oregon would get 9,000 new housing choice vouchers, which would be incredible. That's like 10% of what we no, more than that. That's like a quarter of what we have right now. Like that would just, it would be so phenomenal. And it would really, with a housing choice voucher, you pay 30% of your income towards rent. And if your income is zero, you pay $0 towards your rent, right? Like that's how it's supposed to work. So it can really serve people with low incomes. But long answer to your question, sorry, Jim. I think the other thing that I'm really excited about that we are just starting to talk about is the possibility of a state rent assistance system that could also help support people with very, very low incomes. So more to do always.
Thanks, Allison. Are there other board members who have questions about the legislation that passed this year or the new funding that's available? I'm looking to try to see if there's anybody. I don't see anyone.
I'll go again.
Go for it, Jim.
What's next?
Such a good question. So 2022 is going to be like 5 weeks, which is going to be really, really, really short. So a couple legislators have some ideas. I think, you know, I have this feeling that legislators and probably like all of you are tired of talking about COVID, but unfortunately we probably have some more COVID talking to do, right? We still are having impacts from COVID, particularly on renters and people experiencing homelessness. So we're going to have to work on that this session. We have some we have one super wonky proposal that I will just tell you for Jim's benefit. There was a lot of affordable housing that was built by the federal government in the 60s and 70s with federal government dollars, still has rent assistance attached. A lot of times it's owned by private owners and has been for decades, like either a single person or a private company, and they're not necessarily mission-oriented nonprofits. Been doing hard work to buy up all of those buildings over the years to make sure that they remain affordable. But there's a proposal that we didn't quite pass in 2021 that would provide an extra added tax incentive for owners to sell to preservation buyers. So we'll bring that back. And then we got to start thinking big for 2023. And I want to go all in on a long-term rent assistance program. So.
Peggy.
So Allison, that was all great news. And I just want to say thank you for all that good news. And now, unfortunately, I want to say something that's a little bit of bad news. That Oregon Housing and Community Services notified CSC that they are going to take back $12 million of emergency rental assistance from us and put it in a pool that can be accessed by other communities. Although we have people in the pipeline that we are processing their applications who have requested the full $12 million. So that's for our Lynn, Benton, and Lincoln counties. And, this is a tragic situation. I'm fighting this tooth and nail, and it is, I'm just beside myself because frankly, the way I see this is it will be money that is going straight to Portland metro area and out of our area for the people in our communities that need help. So that's the bad news.
Yeah, thanks, Peggy. And thank you for all of the hard work you've been doing. I know this rent assistance, like standing up a whole new system to process thousands and thousands of applications has been just an incredible amount of work. So thank you for all your sleepless nights and long weekends and all the work you're doing.
Are there other questions for Allison on legislation or funding on all the homeless and housing related topics? Susan, do you have a question? Typically we have the board members ask questions, but if it's a quick one that's on this topic, go for it.
Yes, it's in the letter box, the comment box.
Yes, in the chat you had asked about low-income costs for long-term care and people with disabilities.
Yes, I know Allison remembered me way back when.
Hi, Susan. That is a great question. I'm gonna have to ask somebody and get back to you. Is that okay?
That's great.
I'll put my email, I'll put my email in the chat.
Good. I'm taking notes so I can put it down.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Allison. Thanks, Susan, for the question.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it, Carol.
The cat's in my chair, so I'm having to lean over my computer. Everything, excuse me, I've read about affordable housing. First of all, thank you very much for the presentation. It was a lot of stuff and a lot of money. That it has to be incentivized. And so if you know, for builders to decide they're going to do something, and I may have missed it, but did you say there is funding? If, say, we have a big project that's going to be developed in Corvallis in the next few years, and if we were to, the people I'm working with, I'm with the league, if we were to try to meet with that builder and say, look, shouldn't some of this be affordable? Is there a source of funding that we could, you know, tempt him with?
That's a great question. You know, in lots of other states, they use something called inclusionary zoning for that.
Yeah, we can do that.
Oregon does allow inclusionary zoning, but they make it a little difficult. So it's on our long list of things to fix. Right now, you can only do it in buildings over 20 units, and they have to be in one building. It's anyway. Corvallis, I believe, somebody might need to correct me, maybe Jim, has a construction excise tax.
We do, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking, you can use, yeah, we do have that, and that money is going to, partly it's been going to waive some of the SDC charges. But what I'm curious is if there's a statewide organization or just how we could convince this person, not using local funding, but looking at that. And I had talked a little bit to the city, and the city had indicated that there were organizations of nonprofits that were interested in, say, you know, buying a piece of this property. And
I don't know if there's any state money that would incentivize them to build affordable housing. The city or the county could adopt a property tax exemption that would give them a benefit for doing that.
Sure,
that might be.
Yeah, that's not going to work here. we need, you know.
Yeah, I was gonna put in the chat. Let's see if I can find the link. So last year, or in 2019, the legislature passed House Bill 2001 and 2003. And one of the things that came of that was House Bill 2003 requires that cities say, what are they doing to help build affordable housing? And we got this amazing list of people brainstorming all the things that local jurisdictions could do to build more affordable housing. It's a housing production strategy list. So there might be some creative ideas in there. I am always amazed. It's 20 pages of ideas about in different categories of things that local governments can do to incentivize affordable housing. So I would start there. And then
you're gonna put a link to that, or?
I just did in the chat. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. I don't see any other questions from board members or in the chat. So Allison, thank you for being here and for sharing all the updated legislation and funding that came out of this last session. And maybe we'll invite you back again next year if you have the time.
Anytime. Thanks for having me. It was so nice to see everybody.
Thank you very much. All right, well, we will shift gears and get back to what is on your agenda. It's just the last thing for today, and it's really to make sure to provide feedback to you all about the implementation of your recommendations. And I shared this slide last month, but what has happened since then is the last paragraph there on the right of elected officials meeting jointly in early September to really look at some tangible numbers for what it costs to help shelter folks in micro shelters or motels, and give the go-ahead to city, county, and provider leaders to work together on this to try to identify some possible sites and start working through logistics. So the city, county, provider team has been working hard on that. Starting with number 6, your recommendation on providing capacity to facilitate and coordinate with providers to establish 24/7, 365 sheltering. And as part of the update on your the implementation of your HOPE recommendations, the executive committee asked me to go through and say what is going on in the community, or what new update is there to share with the HOPE board that corresponds to any of these recommendations beyond what the city and the county and provider leads are working on as far as number 6 HOPE recommendation. So for this first one, Community Services Consortium is actively recruiting for a data support full-time employee to work with providers to improve data entry and coordination, and that corresponds directly to your first recommendation. The creating metrics for successful program goals, there's no current activity on that right now, but I do know that CSC has success metrics that once that becomes a priority with staff capacity to work on it can serve as a model. Prioritizing collaboration and coordination of providers and partners at routine situation table or hub meetings. There's no current activity on that because city and county and provider leads are working on the number 6 sheltering recommendation. But I do know that IHN CCO, where Bruce works, they're interested in this because coordinating care for the Medicaid population falls under their purview. And so they're starting the initial conversations to investigate how would it be possible for that system to support more care coordination like this model, but just in the initial discussion phase. Your fourth recommendation about increasing the number of case managers and support staff in our community. There's no current activity on that. There's no capacity to work on that one right now, but we do know that it's going to need leadership and involvement from a bunch of different community partners. The crisis response team, that pilot launched in July with 1 behavioral staff person and 1 law enforcement person. And they're collecting data for the whole next year during this pilot about what is the need for co-response, what is the need for just response with mental health, or just response from law enforcement. And then number 6 is the current priority for elected officials. So we're working hard on that. And trying to figure out what can happen in the short term to help shelter as many folks as we can this fall. And then how do we work collaboratively and perhaps build capacity to work on the longer term solutions as part of this recommendation. Your number 7 recommendation on the resource center. The United Way has hired a new director of community impact named Chris Sherrod, who's doing a great job of facilitating all the stakeholders involved in wanting to co-locate some of their office space for client flow and to be able to work together collaboratively. And I had facilitated this group coming together to meet, I want to say 3, 4, or 5 times before Chris was hired. And we've now transitioned facilitation on this topic to Chris, and he has taken the reins and running with it. Number 8, exploring and investigating the need and the barriers for housing. There's no current activity on that because of other priorities. Same with number 9. Number 10, with acquisition or development of more affordable housing, the city's community development department is continuing to work on adding affordable units. And Corvallis Housing First will receive funding in the coming years to add, I think it was approximately 40 units. Andrea, please correct me if I'm wrong, of permanent supported housing. Did I get that approximately right, Andrea?
Yep.
Okay, good. Thank you. Number 11, with the increasing available rental income assistance options, LBHA, Lynn Benton Housing Authority, is getting about 170 new housing vouchers that are emergency housing vouchers, and they last for 10 years. And they're taking direct referrals from CSC and CARDVA to try to get those out the door for folks who are currently homeless and people fleeing domestic violence. And number 12, no current activity right now. So I hope that was a brief and yeah, go for it.
On the housing voucher, I thought the deal was not so much the voucher, but the housing availability. So once when we talked to Donna, she said, you know, they've got vouchers, but they don't have any, they're having a hard time, people are having a hard time finding a place.
Yes, that
So
has
does this
been the
make it-
ongoing issue.
So does this, the
Can I,
fact that,
can I say something about that?
no, you can't.
Too bad. Show us your cat.
Yeah, it's on the chair.
I know, but show it. Be like, pick that
Let's
dang cat up
see.
and show it to us. Oh,
Oh,
man.
Yeah, look at that.
Okay, so
Okay, go ahead.
CSC and Lynn Benton Housing Authority and CARDVA are working together, and we've all added staff, and we have a special program going where people are being directly funneled into this process, and they're being assisted with locating housing. So yeah, while finding housing is a problem, it's not impossible, but we have staff members who are literally like holding people by the hand and helping them.
So I told you that story about one of the women on the housing committee who used the vouchers, but her landlord told her she had to pay more money because because she was using vouchers, and I think that's not legal.
that's not legal.
It's not legal. So
Okay.
you might want to have a chat with legal aid.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, of course. All right. Thanks for the question, Carol. Hold on, there's something in the chat. Just want to make sure I haven't missed anything. A question about vaccination. Dharma, can I come back to that after I finish the last update? Let me just go ahead and share this last slide so that I make sure to get to it, and then we can ask that question. The next steps for you as a HOPE board, I'm scheduling one-on-one feedback sessions with each of you to give feedback on what has worked for you, where do you feel like this board has hit the mark, where do you think the board going forward could improve, if you plan on serving for another 2-year term, and any other feedback that you want to provide. And then after those one-on-ones, I'll send out an anonymous survey so that you can give feedback where you don't enter your name about anything else you want to share about your experience with the HOPE board so that it can shape what this board does going forward. And then
Isn't that kind of low rent to make people do it anonymously? I mean, we're all adults here. I just feel like, you know, that feels like it's just catering to people who don't want to deal with talking to you and saying, Julie, you know, you said there'd be food at these meetings. There is no food. I mean, I guess if that's what you're going to do, but I just feel like this board's been around. The people are experienced. They got to be able to speak to you and not, you know, do some sub rosa thing anonymously.
Okay.
well,
Sorry, I just want to say I've been reading a lot of leadership stuff, and Brene Brown talks about this, and there's the whole concept of psychological safety. And apparently some of us oldsters who think that just because we have a nice environment, there's psychological safety, but apparently that's not the case.
And I don't think everybody has quite the same personality as you, Carol, and is able to speak their mind and tell me when I have horribly messed up the way you so eloquently do. I'm kidding. But I think it's nice to have an anonymous way to give feedback, because
I just think it does encourage sometimes. You see that with faculty evaluations where people say things that are kind of hurtful, and they don't back it up. And so
well, what I think I'd like to do is pass the anonymous feedback directly to the executive committee, so that in case it's a bashing Julie session, they get to hear about it and give me kind feedback.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Anyway, there'll be some opportunities for feedback this fall.
Frankly, I'm pretty sure it'll be a love fest for Julie.
Oh, well, thank you, Peg. Really having a key question moving forward into October that the executive committee would like you all to start chewing on, and that there will be time at the October meeting to have a discussion about, is what role could the HOPE board possibly play in supporting any part of implementing your recommendations? And what could that look like? You're a volunteer board. And this is a once a month meeting for 2 hours. And could this forum be used to help in any way to support implementation of your recommendations with messaging or education or communication or working on collaboration as a community? So there's not time to answer that here today, but it's something to chew on and think about before your next meeting so that it's not just sprung on you in a month. Were there any other things that we wanted to mention on the next steps part? I'm looking at Jim and Reese, our co-chairs.
Oh, I always have something to say, apparently. Well, it was really nice seeing that summary of what's happening with all of our recommendations. I mean, there was quite a few of them, you know, where, well, there's nothing happening yet. But I think there's some really big ones where a lot is happening, and you know, no one can do it all at once. So it'll take time for progress to happen. But I hope everybody noticed that there were some big recommendations we made, and action is starting to happen. And I have to give credit to our elected officials for, you know, listening to what we had to say and taking the next steps. And you know, to all the staff from both public and nonprofit organizations that are starting to work on this. So we made a difference. We brought attention to some things that were important to do, and work is happening. So thank you, Julie, and thank you everyone for your role in maybe seeing some progress.
Thanks, Jim. I want to make sure we get to the questions and the comments in the chat about vaccination and the increasing rates in our community experiencing homelessness. In particular, Dharma Krishna's question about, are we increasing vaccination efforts in these communities in response to the increase, or are they breakthrough cases for folks who are already vaccinated? I don't know if we have anyone on the call who can answer that question, so it might be something I follow up with.
So, Julie, I'd like to read. I was there yesterday when they were going to do ODOT and Parks and Rec sweeps, and it was paused. It was stopped. And I'm going to read something from an email from Maddie, who's the one who coordinates our SORT outreach. We learned yesterday when the camp sweeps were halted due to multiple people feeling ill and presenting with symptoms. Chris Gray conducted COVID testing for anyone willing to get tested in the park, and 9 out of 14 people came back as positive, 64%. Others who did not get tested have symptoms, so the rate is likely higher.
Oh, geez, Flip, that is sad. Wow. A good positive thing, the response from Anita. Anita, do you want to chime in and share your comment verbally for folks who are on the phone?
I would just share that there's meetings throughout the county and the Samaritan healthcare system to see what we can do to increase our vaccination efforts on all fronts. There's been lots of conversation about whether vouchers could be offered to people, or meals, or some way we could reimburse. And certainly in any crisis situation, my outreach team can come out to people wherever they are and vaccinate them. I cannot offer it every single time, but more than happy, and we've done it multiple times in homes that are tents, homes under freeways, wherever they may be residing in need of a vaccination, we will outreach. And when we do that outreach, a social worker will accompany the RN who does the vaccination and do what we can to provide wraparound support on any front that arises.
Thanks for that, Anita. Dharma Krishna, did that answer your question, or did you have more you wanted to ask about that?
Nope, I think that answers it. I guess it would be good to look into if these are being attributed to breakthrough cases amongst our in-house communities, or if they're related to mainly unvaccinated individuals. Both are concerning, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that. And Flip, do you know if Chris, when he was doing the rapid test, collected any data about whether those folks were vaccinated or not?
My guess is yes, because he and his wife Tara had done what Anita was talking about. They just do pop-up kind of places. And if they're out and about they say, we'll come back and we'll give you chocolate. We'll, they just try to entice people to come. And it was my impression that a lot of these were breakthrough because many people were vaccinated.
Thanks, Flip. All right. Well, thank you for that dialogue. And it sounds like our meeting is completed. Thank you all for being here tonight. Jim or Reese, do you have any closing words before we end? All right. Oh, I hope you learned a lot tonight. Yeah, Reese, go ahead.
I was just thanking everyone for being here, and very informative meeting, a lot of information to digest.
Thank you. Thanks all. I'll go ahead and conclude your September meeting and we'll see you in a month. Take care, everyone.
Bye. Get better, Julie.
Good to see you, Judy.